Hi everyone, this is your Introduction to Stats activity for AP Biology. It is found on page 14 in our notebook this year. The first part is looking over standard deviation. So standard deviation is the most widely used measure of variability. The sample standard deviation, which is denoted by the letter S, is essentially the average of the deviation between each measurement in the sample and sample mean. The larger the spread of the data, the larger the standard deviation. So you have two diagrams here of teacher test averages, and the first question is asking you, how does the mean compare for both teachers? When you look at the mean, you'll see that both of them had a test average of an 80. By the way, if you need to skip ahead on this part, you certainly can to the section that you need to. But if you'd like to reinforce or watch this again, you're more than welcome to stay tuned. The two figures show what kind of data was gathered for both teachers. How would you describe the distribution of test grades for both teachers? For teacher 1, this one right here, I'm going to indicate that the test scores were close together. And then for teacher 2, I'm going to indicate that that has a much larger spread. Than teacher 1. So on number 3, when it asks which data set has the larger standard deviation, so the larger the spread, the larger the standard deviation. So in this case, data set for teacher 2 had the larger standard deviation. The second commonly used concept is standard error of the mean, or what we call that 95% confidence interval. Both of these values indicate measures of confidence, how sure we are where the data from the whole data set would fall. So on page 15, there is a section here for you to do some addition, and you're also going to do some coloring as well. With the first part, it's asking what data falls between -1 and 1 standard deviation. So from this point to this point, you would add up the averages in between, and you should get 68.2% of the data would fall in this range right here. Then you shade that in blue, and then what percent of the data falls between -2 and 2 standard deviations. So now you're going from here and including all the data up to here. And when you add up the percentages, like I did for this first part, when you add up all these percentages, you get 95.4%. So that's why it's called our 95% confidence interval. 95% of the data is going to fall in here. The outliers of the data, the ones that are the extreme high end and extreme low end, are going to be 3 standard deviations away from the mean. So we're going to practice using this chart right here with some test scores. So we have that the average test score was a 75. That's going to be our mean right there. And then I write the number 0 down here at the bottom. And then for 1 standard deviation above the mean, we are given that each standard deviation has a value of 10. So from here, 1 standard deviation, 10 points above the mean would be 85. 10 points below the mean is going to be 10 minus the mean, so that's 65. And then 2 points above the mean would be 95, and then 2 points below the mean would be 55. So you have here, you're going to shade in, I'm sorry, on this part you do not shade it in, but you do indicate the grade here at the top and then how many deviations away from the mean that it is. I had you guys in class do some class data measuring the length of your hand in centimeters, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the data for the entire class. So let's zoom in the right section here. So at Round Rock High School, our average class size, average hand size, was 17.6 centimeters. So that is our mean. And each standard deviation is 1.9 And when we go above and below the mean, what we're going to do is we're going to add and subtract these values from our data. So starting with, starting with the 17.6, I'm going to go 1 standard deviation above the mean. And to do that, I'm going to take 17.6 and I'm simply going to add 1.9 to it. You will never have to calculate this value. That value will be given to you. So 17.6 plus 1.9, and I get 19.5. So if your hand length is between 17.6 and 19.5, you are within 1 standard deviation of the mean. 2 standard deviations of the mean, I'm going to add 1.9 again, and this comes out to 21.4. Now your data might be different from students in other classes, because the more students added their data, the more data we had to collect from, our numbers are going to change. So now I'm going to do 1 standard deviation below the mean. That is 15.7. And now 2 standard deviations below the mean. Is 13.8. Okay, so that is the section on the standard deviation. If you need the information or the video for standard error of the mean, which is part 2 of this activity, please switch to the next video. Thanks for watching.